we are joined by somebody who gets to play in a really fun genre, Jim Zub.
Yes, I am. I'm Zub. I'm here. Yeah, that's right. The owner of Conan from Heroic Signatures, he said, we thought you had the voice and we really love working with you and we're sorry it didn't work out. Stay in touch. You're like, well, that's what everyone says. It would be like the All-Star game or something. Like, hey, this guy Conan, and you come back and you do 6 pages or whatever, And now, whatever, I'm the guy with the hand on the steering wheel of this franchise that is older than Superman, and all this kind of stuff is mind-busting to me and absolutely insane.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 4 of Heroes Journey, the official podcast for CBR, where we talk all things comics and superheroes. I am Sean O'Connell, the deputy editor of comics and superheroes at the website CBR, and I'm joined each week by my brilliant co-host, Sierra Nutkevitch. Sierra, how are you?
I'm fabulous, and you?
I'm doing good. I know it's the end of spooky season. You guys are now listening to this after Halloween, but I want you to know that Sierra is a horror guru. And so later on in this episode, we're going to pick her brain for some of the things, if you don't want to yet put your spookiest stuff away. She's got some great recommendations of ways that you can keep the season going. On this week's episode of Heroes Journey, we are joined by somebody who gets to play in a really fun genre, and that's Jim Zub, who's the writer of the Conan the Barbarian, the current Conan the Barbarian run through comics, talking about some of the stories that he's doing now and what he has coming up planned. All right, so I am overwhelmed with Canadianness. I have 2 Canadians, so I guess I have to ask, Jim, Blue Jays fan or no interest at all?
I'm not a huge baseball guy, but of course, at this moment, I think we all are. Everyone in Canada is focused on the big game. Last night was crazy. It was like you got two for one baseball games.
For people who don't know, we're recording this the day after this 18-inning extravaganza.
Yeah, everyone was up till like 3:30, 3:45 in the morning, watching it on pins and needles. You guys got this one, but I'm hopeful we'll carry through in the end.
I'm outnumbered. All right, so this is Heroes Journey. We're so thrilled to have Jim Zub joining us as a guest. We're going to be diving into all things Conan, of course, but the point of Heroes Journey, as we were sort of talking about before the mics turned on, is that we like to hear about the steps that people took Conan-esque, through the hinterlands to get them to where they are now.
My own weird tales. Yeah,
exactly. But specifically, I want to know if there's someone that you can point to who got you into comics in the first place. Is there someone who handed you a book early or maybe a shop owner?
Oh, yeah. So my older brother is my proto nerd. So like everything that I love in terms of pop culture and things like that was really formed off of his own kind of taste. So he's 4 years older than me, and he was into, we sort of formed a bond over comic books and eventually Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games and video games and sword and sorcery and just like all that stuff. And so I think a lot of that came from that, where I was just constantly wanting to be like my older brother and my older cousins. And especially once we started playing Dungeons and Dragons together at the table, making stories together. And if I could make them laugh or if I could entertain them, then that was the best feeling in the world. And I would never have been able to put it in such a succinct way, but like at that moment, you kind of start to realize I want to tell stories for the rest of my life. I want to make things rather than just sort of be a passive viewer of entertainment.
Do you find yourself often, because you now do like the storytelling professionally, are you all the time, are you stuck in the perpetual DM mode, Dungeon Master mode, or do you get to play sometimes?
Yeah, I'm usually the forever DM of our kind of crew. That's pretty typical. I find a lot of writers that are from comics or other persuasions, when they get into Dungeons and Dragons, they tend to be the Dungeon Master types. We want to pull the strings and do all the fun kind of stuff. And I'm definitely in that mode. Obviously, my brother was my first Dungeon Master, but once he went off to university, I became sort of the Dungeon Master for our crew in high school and then off to college and things like that. So I will occasionally play, but even then, there's always that little flywheel in the back of my head that's sort of like, oh, I would have done it differently, or, oh, there's this moment you could totally embrace this, or hey, I'm giving this to you, just grab it, stuff like that. So you can't help but kind of have that little editorial kind of writer brain going while you're gaming. Same thing when I'm watching movies or reading a book or stuff like that.
Jim, one resource I want to point people to, because there are probably a lot of people watching this who dream about getting into comics, or as Sierra kind of said before we started, what's it like living my dream, and you have this incredible section set up on your website called Comic School Tutorial, where you have these answers to these incredible questions about, how I broke in. And what I love about it is that you basically say, like, I wrote this back in 2007, for a live journal. You updated it in like 2012, but is the industry still sort of similar to the point where like a lot of that knowledge is passable?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is the same, and maybe not little, there's tiny technical things that have changed, obviously, in terms of, digital delivery and entertainment, and it's a more international industry because we're so much more connected over the internet. The fact that we can have this interview right here, across multiple cities in real time, speaks to that kind of change in technology. But the fundamentals in terms of storytelling and the fundamentals in terms of your artistic journey or how to tell stories or building up a body of work, and no one's going to pay you until you create work worth paying for, that always holds true across the board. And I started writing those live journal posts because once I started to get a few, tiny little perches on this climb up the mountain or whatever you want, analogy we want to use, I would instantly get asked, well, how do you do that? Well, and so as social media was sort of starting up and Twitter and all those kinds of things, I didn't want to give a 120 character answer, 140 character answer, or I didn't want to do threads and threads. And I thought, well, if I write it up once really extensively, then it's way less work for me, because then I can give as many people that advice as possible. I can also sort of summarize my own thoughts on it and really try and better understand what has worked and what hasn't. And, the only way to break in is the one that works for you. But I've noticed patterns over the years in terms of being, a self-starter and building your own work. And now we have more tools than ever to do that. That doesn't mean you're going to get the success you want in, your mind or what you feel you deserve. But if you're not putting work out there and you're not regularly creating stuff and putting it out into the world, no one is going to find you, and that's always kind of held true. Put out good work, learn from it, be a good person, treat other people the way that you would want to be treated. And those are like the foundational kind of baseline steps. And they're true in comics, they're true in video games and art and animation and gaming, and maybe just being a good person in general, So being a good collaborator and understanding that almost all these things are built with a team. So many times in comics, because the writer tends to be the constant over the course of a long run on a book, that person will get prescribed the majority of the fame. So they'll talk about Dan Slott's Spider-Man, or whatever. Right now it's Jim Zub's Conan. And that's really cool. That feels amazing. But the reality is this book is nothing without the art teams, without Roberto De La Torre and Doug Braithwaite and Diego Rodriguez and Fernando Dagnino and, editors and letterers and all these people working behind the scenes on marketing and all that stuff. And you can't shout them out all the time, every single person. It's not like every single time I can say 25 names of people, but just keeping those people in mind and trying to elevate everyone else as well, I think is such a huge part of being a good collaborator and being a good creative person, and just understanding that these things, we move mountains together kind of stuff.
I love that. I think that the collaborative nature of it to pull it back to like the D&D, because it seems like that was the beginning of your storytelling career. Do you feel like you, and that's it for anyone who has never played D&D, it's like the ultimate collaborative co-writing experience. Do you feel like you bring that mentality into the actual creative of it as well?
Totally. I feel like Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing games have informed so much. Like I literally did a TED Talk about how D&D changed my life and made me, the creative person that I am today. It made me a better teacher. It made me a better communicator and collaborator. It reminds me that everyone gets a turn and everyone gets to be involved, that we all want to make something together and be proud of it. It helps me, improv a lot better in terms of that teamwork kind of component, that we are building something together. It's not just mine. Even if I'm the dungeon master, even if I'm dictating the scenario and doing those kinds of things, everyone's going to have a piece of this thing and bring themselves into it as well. And then when it comes to actually writing, I think it has a huge portion to play as well, because some writers can kind of get known for their voice, like every character sounds a bit like them, or that once they take over, that character is going to start shifting. And I'm sure I have my own kind of verbal cadences and things that I do, but as much as possible, I want to role play those characters and what they're doing in this situation. It's not about what I would do. It's what would Peter Parker do? What would Steve Rogers do? What would Wanda Maximoff or Diana of Themyscira or whoever you're writing, really, Conan of Samaria, that these characters have their own through line. And so the first thing I do when I'm working on a project, even on characters that I feel like I know, is I dive into research really heavily. And reading for research is different from reading for entertainment, because I've got a notepad literally beside me as I read. I've got stuff on my tablet or the physical books, and I'm just jotting down notes, ideas, thoughts, questions, little bits of dialogue or particular vocabulary that a character has or personality traits. And different writers have different ways of approaching that character, but slowly and surely I start to see kind of my version of it, or I start to see through lines that work for me, either the most recent or from their classic past, or taking bits and pieces and bringing it all together so that I could try and not just tell a story I want to tell, but make it feel true to what I think that character is all about. And that doesn't mean these characters can't change. These characters are constantly going through drama and all sorts of things. But at least if I've got that baseline to go from, I'm going from a place of knowledge rather than just trying to pave over everything that came before and just go like, all right, it's all about, it's the me show, And maybe that means that my writing isn't as, someone can't look and go, oh, that's so Zub, you know what I mean? Or whatever may have you. But I feel like in the grand scheme of things, that's going to be better, over the length and breadth and depth of the character in the run.
All right, so let's apply that to Conan then. When did you feel like, if you feel this way, that you figured his voice out, or like how has his voice evolved under your watch?
For sure. That's a good question. It's such a surreal thing to even talk about this, because like growing up, I read Conan the Barbarian. I read, all kinds of different fantasy novels, and I had no idea, obviously, that anything would be possible. People will say to me, oh my God, this is like a bucket list for you. And I go, no, it's not. And they go, what do you mean it's not? I go, when I was a kid, I wanted to meet John Buscema or something. I wanted to go to Gen Con and play D&D with the people who made D&D. Like that was as wide as my dreams extended. So the fact that I get to A, ever write a Conan story, B, have it published, C, now whatever, I'm the guy with the hand on the steering wheel of this franchise that is older than Superman and all this kind of stuff is mind-busting to me and absolutely insane. Yeah, it is surreal. And so you have those two parts of your brain that are kind of fighting, where there's a part of your mind that's just like, you audacious, egotistical bastard. How dare you think you can even do this? But on the other hand, you're like, well, whatever, you've written like 9,000 pages of comics, so you better keep going now. This is what you do. And so again, the research kind of is a big part of it. And when I started off, my first Conan project was actually co-writing it with Gail Simone. We did Conan Red Sonja, the first time those characters have been together in I want to say 15 or 16 years, because it's a Dark Horse and Dynamite at the time. And Dan Panosian and drew this amazing miniseries that we put together, sort of the characters over the ages. And I feel like it was good, but it was very much kind of surface level. Okay, the character is the barbarian and he says those cool things, but I didn't really understand him. I was sort of hitting those notes and just like, man, this is the only time I'm ever going to get to write a Conan story. Better make it cool. And then I got to write him again at Marvel in Avengers No Road Home. And that was teamed up with Mark Waid and Al Ewing. And we all brought different stuff into this epic Avenger story. And they asked if we could put Conan into it. And I was terrified of doing that because I knew the hardcore fan base is like, Conan on a superhero team. So we tried to keep it as like sword and sorcery pure as possible. And Al did a wonderful job bringing some moral kind of conundrums to Conan, and I was trying to tell this real epic kind of classic sword and sorcery story in the middle. And I feel like we hit every so often those notes. But the thing it wasn't even Conan's voice as a character. It was the narrative cadence. So what makes Conan, I think, unique, maybe not unique, but special in terms of comics, is the fact that Roy Thomas, when they did the original Conan #1 in 1970, wisely realized that sound effects were not the solution to a Conan story. That if you just did / ugh, that it was going to be a really boring and annoying and repetitive, that you couldn't just use biff bam pow or whatever you want to call it. And so instead he took the original Robert E. Howard kind of narrative style, this poetry, this lyricism describing whatever, the coppery smell of blood in the air and the tensing of the thews and like muscles and bone and metal and all these sensory bits and atmospheric bits that kind of slowed things down, that you weren't just looking at a cool piece of art of Conan with a sword fighting some other guy, but that you were feeling the tension and the lyricism in this like almost operatic kind of feel of the thing. And that's the thing that I didn't get a handle on at first. I don't think I did a terrible job, but the first few times I wrote Conan, it was just like, okay, he talks like this. And I'm not going to suddenly have this narration jumping into the Avengers story. It's going to feel weird. But then when I got to write them, I wrote my first solo Conan story in Savage Sword of Conan, the full color series that Marvel did. This is like 2019. And that was my first chance to sort of go, okay, what is Robert E. Howard's Conan? What is Roy Thomas's, Kurt Busiek's, like some of my favorite writers, Tim Truman? What did they do? And what can I do to sort of not carbon copy them, but to learn from it in that same kind of research sort of way? And realizing that I had to push whatever, my vocabulary, I had to push my understanding of the rhythm of words and the way they sound together. And at Marvel, that production schedule was so crazy. And then we hit lockdowns. And so I think by the time I was starting to sort of even see it, we were on pencils down and I never really got my hands around it. I'm still super proud of the issues that I did at Marvel, but it was such a weird time in our lives, you know, and there was a lot more going on around us. And so understandably, I think we were all quite distracted. And by the time we came back, it felt like we were on our back legs and then the series was over. And I thought, oh, I'll never get to write Conan again. And when Fred Malmberg, the owner of Conan from Heroic Signatures, he said, you know, we thought you had the voice and we really love working with you. And we're sorry it didn't work out. Stay in touch. You're like, well, that's what everyone says. You know? Then they went and they decided they were going to do their prose books with Titan, and they were starting to negotiate the possibility of doing the comics at Titan. And they asked if I would throw my hat in the ring to pitch. There were multiple writers that were going to be pitching on a new series of Conan. And what would you do if you could start from, you know, the ground floor? And I was like, well, I just did it at Marvel. I'll never get it in a million years. It's hopeless. And my wife quite wisely said, do you want this? Like, do you care about this? You know, pitch your heart out or don't do it at all. You're convinced you're going to lose. So what have you got to lose, you know? And so I really went into it with, okay, let's go back to the source material. Let's look at Robert E. Howard's Weird Tales, the original prose. Why is this character still vibrant after 90 plus years of publishing? Why is this character... There are a lot of authors that contributed to Weird Tales. There are a lot of people that have written sword and sorcery stories. Why is this a foundation of the genre? And just sort of opened myself up to it and kind of like, I don't know, marinated in it, like just fire hose of material, and tried to understand it better and put as much of that into the pitch that I was like, we got to go back to the source. We got to really bring that lyricism and that poetry to the page. And audaciously, I will try and do that, you know? And not just copy word for word what Robert E. Howard did, because if we copy those stories, they've been adapted wonderfully by some of the best in the industry, then we're just a cover band that we have to tell new stories that feel as vibrant, as exciting, that from month to month, you don't know what the cliffhanger is going to turn into, because it's not just whatever, Tower of the Elephant or Red Nails. Some of my favorite stories, Queen of the Black Coast, absolutely seminal, phenomenal sword and sorcery storytelling, but what have we got? Like, what can we do to surprise you and surprise myself and things like that? And thankfully, I whatever analogy we want to use, I dropped the diamond and I caught it right before I hit the ground, and I got to do it again. And without trying to sound too dramatic, I couldn't blame whatever lockdowns, and I couldn't blame, pencils down or any of these other things. Like, you got Conan back. No one gets to write this character. You get to do it twice.
No, that's so incredible. And Sierra, I just want to follow up real fast. Like,
Yeah.
I can't imagine how many creators get into a project and think, oh, this
Right.
first shot is my only shot, right? So I better give it all I have.
And it is. Yeah, most of the time it is, right? Like, and it's not that the vision that I had was that it would be like the All-Star game or something. Like there would be a Conan anniversary special down the line, or and they would say, hey, this guy Conan, and you come back and you do 6 pages or whatever, but it's not, but you'd never get the baton. You'd never get to run as hard and as fast as you could again. And to be able to do that again, and then to have, I don't know, I'm mixing all my metaphors here. Lightning struck twice and we caught it in the bottle. Like now it works. Now I hit the ground, and we got the art teams I've always dreamed of, and the scope and the scale that I'd always hoped for. And the lyricism really started to sort of crackle out of the keyboard. And that doesn't mean that it's easy. I think the best compliment that I get right now is that they go, oh, you were born to write Conan. And I go, man, my drafts think otherwise, but thank you so much. Like, that you think that this is like flowing out of me like it's a possession or something. It does sometimes. Like, there's definitely moments when it's crackling and I'm like, whoa, I'm on a roll here. I've come down to the dinner table and I told my wife occasionally, like, I got to go back upstairs. Like, it's happening, whatever. And you pray for those moments when it's all going easy. But yeah, it's getting easier too. I feel like the more I do of it, I can tap into that easier. I feel it more. I know when a sentence is kind of snapping properly, or when it's got that rhythm that feels a bit Howardian, and it's still me. Like, it's not, but that it's got that right amount of pulpiness and that right amount of, I don't know, under most other series, it would be purple. Like, you'd read the prose and you go, this is a little overwrought. And then you look at the art and you go, never mind, this is awesome. Look at this thing.
It's the vibe.
Yeah, it's exactly what it's supposed to be. That's right. It's the vibe. Like, you got to match the vibe. And there's a few other characters I think you could do that with. I used to love the, like your Roger Stern, Doctor Strange. I feel like Doctor Strange is another character you could just wax poetic, or, like Constantine or Swamp Thing. Those are the books where you can just like unload that kind of poetry fire hose on people, and they're just like, they love it because it's so badass, and it feels, it just enhances the kind of material. So
it's
in a
like
cool
the specificity of the voice. Like with Constantine, you get like this very detective fiction, like hard-boiled energy. And with this, you have this, not Shakespearean. Shakespearean is not the right word, but you're like that florid, poetic tone.
Totally.
And so you talked about how you had to like work so hard to develop that voice. Is there a character that when you write, you feel like that's my voice I'm writing, that you identify with more strongly?
I mean, it's obviously I identify with all the characters, that I write over the years. My creator-owned stuff is obviously kind of the purest form of that. So you look at whatever Skull Kickers is like D&D when I'm 8 years old, and we're like, kick a skeleton in the face and let's cause trouble. It's like a sugar shock of fantasy and selfish treasure hunting and stuff like that. Wayward is like the teen angst and stuff that I was feeling as I was growing up, and where do you fit in the world, and you're a weirdo, and all that kind of thing. And then, Glitter Bomb was this horror book that's very different from other ones, that's got a little more of kind of my own frustrations and fears about working in entertainment, and how much of yourself you have to give away in order to meet any kind of success or visibility whatsoever. And so those are probably the ones that flow out of me the easiest, but they're different. They say different things about writing and about storytelling and stuff like that. When it comes to like pop culture characters, I don't know, it depends. Like, there's been times when I'm writing a Rick and Morty, Rick Sanchez rant, and it's just like my own frustration and anger kind of pouring out of me. And you're like, oh, if you were uncorked and you could just say whatever you want, that guy can do it. But I think what's fun about, and this gets back to the role play of the whole thing, when I was writing, Uncanny Avengers or Avengers No Surrender, and you're writing Captain America, and you have to write the best of us, like someone who believes and to their absolute marrow core in what they're doing and why they do it, that comes out of you, that comes from a place in you. And so it's not that they're not me, it's just you're sort of like moving the lens or refracting the light differently, or whatever kind of analogy we want to use to find that thing in yourself. When I'm writing whatever, a romance, you're like, yeah, man, love is fun. Love is awesome. And then when you're writing the breakup, man, love sucks. Love hurts. People, hurt each other all the time. And that's the role play of the thing. I feel like I'm, acting on the page or acting on the script, and it's a different kind of a feeling because I'm writing in both styles. On Conan, I have some of the artists I work with where I work full script. So I do page 1, panel 1. Here's the description, here's the dialogue or narration and what may have you. But there's some of the artists, Del Torre and now Dagnino, when I was working with Jonas Scharf and Ivan Gill on the event miniseries, I've been doing it plot style. So I say, here's the main events on the page. Here are the main key salient points that we have to cover. Please, this is the most visual important panel for these reasons. They lay out the whole page. They draw the whole thing. And then I go back in and I dialogue it, or I do the narration. And so in that ways, I'm almost playing to the page. Like I'm looking in and I go, what's a dialogue page? And I got 4, beats here. Okay, it's an argument back and forth. These people are saying this and doing this. And sometimes surprising yourself in terms of, I've got this much room. That's about 2 balloons. What is the most important thing? We have to cover this much information, but also make it interesting. How's Richard going to make this fit the composition and all that kind of stuff? So it's like a puzzle that I'm sort of assembling from all the pieces. Like I've given you all the clues. Now you've given me the murder, and now I have to, narrate it. I don't know. It's a really fun kind of a challenge. And at first I found it really intimidating, and now I kind of love it because the artist really gets to flex. And then I get to glaze them up and just be like, check this out. Look at this amazing art. I'm going to make this as big and bombastic, in the dialogue. I'll get out of your way, and then you show everyone what you're all about.
It's that collaborative effort you were talking about earlier. It's just, there's all
Big
these
time.
pieces that belong to it. So, Jim, we've been lucky enough to sort of look ahead, and we've seen A Nest of Serpents. I kind of want to know, you don't have to get into specifics, but how far out on Conan are you planned right now?
Oh man. So I'm signed on for the book. So I was promised 12 issues from the Hop. And that's why if you read essentially our free comic book day number 0 through to number 12, it's one big honkin' epic, because I didn't know if we'd ever get a 13. And then by the time, sales on the series have been phenomenal. So like by issue 3, we were already negotiating for the long term, and they asked me what I had in mind. And I told them I wanted to do this sort of mythic arc of the character where we'd have an event book every year for, 4.5 years. So I'm on till issue 50 of Conan the Barbarian, and it's all planned out. Like I know
How
it's
often does
crazy.
that get
In
to
the
happen?
modern
That's-
era, you don't get, I was talking to Zdarsky about this, and he said, look, man, other people might get longer runs, but every 6 to 12 months, they're looking over their shoulder like, God, is it my time? You know what I mean? Like, and you know where you're going, so you can set pieces up. So there's stuff in issue 4 that'll pay off in the final story arc. There's stuff in issue, 13 and 12 that will pay off in the final story arc. And some of them are subtle, and some of them, I think going back, people will realize they're not very subtle, and that's great too, but and saying different things about the character, like the original Weird Tales prose stories of Conan. We're jumping around the timeline. So the very first story of Conan is a King Conan story called The Phoenix on the Sword. And he's already king. And so in many ways, we're reading tales of Conan, not wondering whether or not he's going to survive, but just how's this all going to play out, And very much in the same way, the way I explain it is we're in dramatic order. So we're jumping around the timeline, and I'm giving you the information you need when you need it. So this character gets introduced here because you need to know who they are, because they're going to do something important down the road and what may have you. And so it's a really fun challenge for me where we're not going just straight chronological order, but I'm keeping track of that timeline and then reordering stuff based on dramatic, need. And I get to write all the eras of the character, the young, impetuous kind of thief, exploring the world and sowing his oats and causing trouble everywhere he goes. The man who eventually becomes a leader of men and realizes there's more to the world than just himself. And then eventually the king of Aquilonia, and what it takes to be the barbarian king, to be someone both outside of society and within it, and that's the core theme of Conan when you get right down to it. It's civilization versus savagery, and not the way that we typically think, because the civilized man, the governments and the religions and these people in positions of power, they're duplicitous and they lie to your face and they'll put a knife in your back. Conan and the savages of the world, they are honor bound, and they'll tell you exactly how it's going to go. Cross this line and I'll slay you. and I'll fight by your side to your dying day if you fight by mine, you know? And so who's truly savage and who's truly civilized? That's kind of what's at the crux of the whole thing. And it's what makes him a great character and a great leader is the dichotomy of civilization and savagery. This barbarian poet, you know, this murderous, wondrous, you know, story of adventure, and that he can't just be placed in one kind of bucket. That, like all of us, he's full of complexities, even though we think we can, you know, judge him right from a surface level or a visual. And I think that's what's so cool about it. And the more I do, the more I appreciate that and try and bring those qualities into it. And hopefully by the end, I'll have figured it out, but we'll have to wait and see, you know?
I mean, barbarian poet is such a turn of phrase. It's so incredible. I mean, I know that I want to just like wrap us up with like so a couple final questions, which is we're talking about looking forward, the blessing it is to get to do to know 50 issues from now that you're going to get to pay something off. Is there we've also talked about, you know, who inspired you when you first started, but is there anyone whose work inspires you now that you're looking forward and like these are the next generation of like up and coming comic artists that you want to shout out?
Oh man, there's so many amazing people in the industry right now. Like just as peers, as people coming up, it's such a cool time, you know, to be looking at comics and the excitement that people are bringing to the page. Whether that's, you know, I think it's weird. It's like in cohorts, right? Like Charles Soule and I kind of got into it around the same sort of time. I was a little bit before him in terms of my pre-writing career when I was doing coloring or editorial, but then we sort of really got our pace at the same kind of time or things like that. But I look at whatever, Zoe Thorogood or Ram V, or just like the number of books that I'm reading on a month-to-month basis that just get me pumped. You know, Dan Waters is doing such cool stuff right now that whatever I'm reading, I'm just so pumped and excited to be part of this industry. You know, James Tynion's created an empire of amazing creator-owned stuff, you know, was on the biggest book in the industry and walked away because his own stuff was that much more exciting to him. Whatever, Chip and you know, Kieran and all these other people who have become my peers and friends. I think that's what's so mind-busting to me. It's not just I get to do this for a living. I get to go places, I get to celebrate with people. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I was at a tabletop gaming show, and some of the people who developed Dungeons and Dragons through the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s are my friends, and we get to hang out, we get to play games together. Or I'm heading to England later this week, and I'm going to be at the Thought Bubble Festival in a couple of weeks, and I get to hang out with a bunch of my friends in the UK and again celebrate another crazy year of being creative. And so I'm so pumped to see what people have got coming down the line. I love seeing new artwork from all kinds of incredible artists. I love discovering that indie gem, you know, that's just going to knock me out. And that it's a constant kind of a flow, and it keeps you on your toes, but it also makes you really, really appreciate how much work goes into this stuff. I think that's the thing too. Like, when a book is good, you know, when a book is bad, you can blame 100 different things. You know, it's the deadline, it's incongruency between the art team and the writing, or, you know, publishing plans changed, or the event book overwhelmed and ate the monthly title, or whatever may have you. But when a book is good, you kind of know the Fabergé egg, you know, like all the detail and the care and the artistry that goes into it. And especially if it's a monthly title, there's a weird feeling of like, okay, we just made a Fabergé egg. All right, over the shoulder, next one, let's go. You know, like our 25th issue of Conan was an oversized, fully painted epic. So Alex Horley did 38 oil paintings. He took over a year to paint this thing. It's absolutely stunning. It's a victory lap in a lot of ways, and a celebration of everything that we've done so far in the first 2 years on the Conan series as we, you know, charge forth into year 3, axe held high, or whatever may have you. But also 30 days later, issue 26 is coming out, and that's now, you know, in my purview and focal point. And it's not to say that the painted issue doesn't matter. Unbelievable, you know, effort, and so damn proud of it. And I know with a bit of luck, I'll be signing that issue for the rest of my days. But next month looms, and the next one goes off to print, and the next one, the next one. And, you know, it's like this weird, crazy arena, and one foe enters and another foe leaves. And at any one point in time, you've got 5 or 6 issues in production in various stages. So I just got sketches from the artist who's going to be drawing issue 33. And, these are the character designs that I wrote up for them. And we're starting to get cover sketches and concepts and things like that. And so 25's out, and 8 months from now, you'll get to read, 33. Yeah. And I know where that's at because it's already written, and onward we go. And that's both the joy and the weird. You don't have time to I don't know, to be afraid the next one's due, and you got to rock it out. So
right. A deadline is always waiting around every corner. All right. Yeah. I'll get you out of here on this one then. Jim, as someone who has written Conan for this long and has wrestled with what makes him challenging, why do we have such a difficult time bringing this character to live action? And do you think it's due for another attempt?
I think... Oh man, that's a good question. It's fascinating because there was a time in the 80s, I saw that Conan the Barbarian movie there with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it blew my mind because they took it seriously. It was an R-rated film. First of all, I was way too young to have seen that R-rated film, but man, felt like Dungeons and Dragons and like big gold and action and craziness and amazing, with the best soundtrack ever, by the way. And that's what made it tick. It's not a great adaptation of the original Robert E. Howard stories. It's a mishmash of all kinds of different ones. And John Milius brought a lot of his own kind of philosophy into the mold, but he took it seriously and he really delivered on it. And Arnold's more of a physical presence than he wasn't, a very deeply trained actor at that point in time. And he would have struggled to say the kinds of things that Conan actually says in the original Weird Tales. And yet it's so iconic, and it's created this pop culture shadow that sort of looms over the character. And a lot of times people, I think they assume the simpleton barbarian because of that, portrayal. And yet it's also one of the best things that's ever happened to the character because it put him in this stratosphere of pop culture that everyone knows who the character is. That if I ask you the name of a barbarian, almost everyone will say Conan, like around the world, and we're currently in 11 languages with the comic series. And I think a big part of that is thanks to the movie and to the novels and everything else. What's difficult about it is uncompromising. And so I feel like you do need that R-rated film. You need to find, ideally, a young actor who's got a physical presence, but can also kind of be that brooding, kind of stoic sensibility. I actually feel like Momoa looked really good. I don't feel like the script did him any favors. That was the biggest problem. I felt like he looked like a pretty good Conan, but the story just seemed to meander in the weirdest ways and didn't follow any of the source material, which kind of made me really sad. And so that's what I think you need. I think you need, like kind of we did with the comics, roll back that source material. You'll never be able to do a perfect adaptation. I think it's hard to say what the best medium will be, but given the fact that the majority of the Conan stories are actually short stories, you can read them in one sitting, the prose stories, that a TV series in some ways would work better because you can, in a streaming series would be great because then you can adjust the length of them based on what you need them to be to deliver those stories. But if you can't do that, if you've got to mash them together into a film, there's certainly ways to do it. I think that could be, have the intensity and the violence and the philosophy that will stand the test of time and won't just feel like a pale echo of the source material or of the 1980s Arnold movie. But you've got to have a director and you've got to have production companies that are willing to do that kind of thing. And I think, again, because of some of the cliches of the character, they assume things about him that are just not true. The character got surprising depth. And yes, there's explosive, insane amounts of violence, but it's not just gore for gore's sake or sex for sex sake or anything else. It's got this bigger beating heart of survival and civilization and savagery and all this stuff. And if you convince the halls of power, look, there's more to be said here, and there's a cool franchise to be built on this thing, if you pay close attention and you bring in the people who are actually passionate about this stuff and understand it, that's always going to be true. Notice the superhero movies went from just like the occasional hit to stratospheric success when they actually adapted the stuff more closely to the source material. They updated it to fit our modern kind of world in terms of, yes, Iron Man is a weapons dealer in the 2000s instead of, Cold War 60s, but the beating heart of the character was true. And since this is the Hyborian age and it's a fictional realm, you're not worried about the modern world. What you're worried about is, can you get that pulp core and can you really deliver on it emotionally and substantively,
The way you talk about it reminds me of, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Stephen King's Dark Tower series,
Oh yeah, totally.
and the attempts to bring that to live action, and just like,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fascinating because the book stands so strong. And then, different every single one of those adaptations has got their own production kind of gauntlet that they've run
right.
and come up against difficulties, whether it's casting, whether it's budget, whether it's pacing or how much or too much. And these are different mediums. It's not to say that you don't make any changes. I think you look at the Lord of the Rings trilogy and you go, man, oh man, like there's huge sweeping changes from the original Tolkien text, but it's done with a focus on, okay, we're doing it for these reasons and we're going with our eyes open rather than it just being like, well, I don't like that. You're like, wait. This thing has existed for generations. Like I go to comic conventions now, and not to sound too hyperbolic, I got people old enough to be my grandfather coming over to see me. And I know the first thing they've read of mine is Conan because they call me Grim Jim, which is my credit in the comics. And they say, wait, you're Grim Jim? And you're like, yes. And they bring that book and they say, when I read your comics, I feel like I'm 15 again. And you're like, wait, that is a responsibility. Like that is a legacy that's really, really sweet and amazing and cool that you're tapping into something, not just nostalgia, but I think something wider and more true than that. And so when you adapt these things to, everyone assumes because of the numbers involved that movies are the ultimate form of entertainment, that they're the biggest things because everyone knows about the movies. Everyone goes to the movies and ticket prices and budgets and all those things. And so there's that idea of, well, if they could just adapt it to a movie, and they'll say it all the time, man, I can't wait till whatever book I've worked on or thing is a movie. And you're like, that would be cool, but I made a really cool comic and I hope you love it for those reasons too. And would I be so stupid as to say, no, I don't want to see any of this turned into a movie? No, of course not. But that those are not the end goal of every single pathway.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's not... that the Invincible comic is amazing and it just so happens is a really good cartoon as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jim, thank you so much for taking the time, and we really appreciate it. And we hope to point more people towards the Conan books and just keep increasing that audience.
Oh, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
How was your spooky season? How was your October, Sierra?
I mean, my October is always lovely. Every year I give myself a challenge. I call it my 31 Spooks October. I try to watch a horror movie every day of October. Am I always successful? No. Who has that kind of time? But I'm generally like pretty successful. Some years I hit it and some years I don't. This year we're recording ahead of Halloween, and so I still have a shot.
Do you watch classics or new things? Like classic horrors or things you've never seen before?
I do a mix. It depends on the year. I have different goals for different years. Here's the thing is that sometimes when you have friends and loved ones, they don't always want to watch the like international subtitled really weird body horror that you want to watch. And that's okay. And then you end up watching Beetlejuice or Scream for like the 1,000th time, which I'm never going to complain about. I'm never going to complain about rewatching Scream, but it does eat into my numbers,
Yeah, so I don't really, my Halloween and October is different now. I had kids and it was way more exciting when I was like able to introduce them to some of the scarier stuff and nothing too hardcore, obviously, but like the good PG-13 type horror films to get them in the mood. And with one of my kids, it really took like he loves the Scream franchise now. His favorite film one of his favorite films is the first Halloween. And so, but there's my favorite horror movies as a teenager were the slasher, the Friday 13th and the Nightmare on Elm Streets and all those films. And my kids never really got into that. They dig a little bit more psychological horror. Although, like they did love Scream and the way that it kind of referenced all those things, but like, I don't know. It did, but now they're older. And so like, I used to look forward to bringing them out trick-or-treating and things like that. And that all that stuff has kind of gone by the wayside. So it's different for me. I more look forward to, Christmas. Like I'm one of the people who would set up Christmas on August 1st if I could.
I resent that. No, I kid. It's because, well, you know what I mean? It gets in the way of a Halloween season. I don't want to see Christmas decorations before I've even celebrated Halloween.
I do feel like Halloween has become a year-round season. There's definitely horror stuff all throughout. And I will say, and I want to get your take on this too, and maybe this can kind of bleed into our news segment of this week's episode. There are horror films that are kind of going after the Oscar race, whether it's Sinners or Weapons, and there's one other one that I thought that was kind of in the mix as well too. Do you see that being, and we're going to get into comics in a bit, because I have a big question I want to ask you about that too, but just briefly while we sort of sidetrack onto this, do you think this is the year that horror sort of breaks through?
Every time there's like a big breakout horror hit that is like legitimately artful and beautiful, which every year to me there is one that is legitimately artful and beautiful, we have this conversation and we're like, maybe this year. Like Hereditary, it was like the one I feel like the people like, if it's not this one, when it's never going to happen. I don't know. Horror has traditionally always been a really tough category for the Oscars, but in the same way that it's really hard to get a superhero movie rewarded by the Oscars, it's very hard to get a horror movie rewarded. They do really love the entire creative team behind Sinners, so that maybe has a shot. I would be really shocked if Weapons did. Weapons, while fabulous and really interesting in its own right, is so rooted in like its horror. It is traditional, straightforward horror. I don't think it has those same things. I would love to eat my words. I would be thrilled to eat my words, but I think maybe I'm just going to have to create my own award show that is horror specific, and it's going to have different categories. And the categories aren't like, oh, it's like, television versus TV movie versus whatever, like the Emmys. No, Emmys. I mean, it's like, it's slashers, it's ghost stories, it's like, it's just different genres.
Yeah. I got you. Frankenstein was the other title that slipped my mind earlier as something that's in the conversation. As we were talking about earlier in the episode, Sierra will not let spooky season go. She's going to keep it going all through the end of the year and probably into 2026. As is your right. You feel free. We're not taking the decorations down from the house. They're going to stay up year round. And so we wanted to do a recommendation segment.
Never not be spooky.
Yeah. We want to do a recommendation segment where we talk about some of the things that can help you guys keep the horror going. And I have to start with Sierra because she is our horror expert, our aficionado on Heroes Journey. Where are we going, Sierra? Where are the people who want to be spooked the most? Where do they start?
It's always hard to narrow down. Horror comics has a long and storied and beautiful history, but I feel like a really great introduction to horror comics is one of my favorites, Black Hole by Charles Burns. And one of the really exciting things about it is, other than it just being an incredible story about alienation and adolescence, is that it really takes its audience very seriously. It's a very mature body horror, so many trigger warnings for body horror and sex and gore and all those things. But what it really is kind of this expressionistic story that externalizes, that makes physical the monstrous feelings of what it is to grow up and the alienation that you feel. It makes it so literal. And one of the really exciting things is that we're going to have an incredible filmmaker, Jane Schoenbrunn, I'm so sorry, I'm mispronouncing that, who will be adapting this very soon into a series. And so if you want to get it on the ground floor, to know about this book before anyone else and get to say, I read this actually before it became this huge phenomenon, I highly recommend picking it up. So yeah.
I'm so glad you brought it up, because when the Netflix series got announced recently, I'm completely unfamiliar with it, but a lot of people on the CBR staff were like, oh my God, people at Netflix are not prepared for what this story is. And
oh no.
So I guess you have to grab the source material.
Or for them as a filmmaker.
Yeah, true. So I guess you also recommend, I saw the TV Glow. People should probably check that out to get a sense of the tone.
I do. And if you want to get real weird with it, their first film, which is We're All Going to the World's Fair, it takes place entirely in one room. I don't want to say like a Zoom project, but it was very much like COVID era. We talked a little bit about that with Jim Zub and like how that impacted creativity. And she was somebody who really took that to heart and made it part of the process. And so I highly recommend that very weird film.
Okay.
I say weird affectionately, to be clear.
All right. I'm going to keep it in the realm of comics, only because I just recently picked up and read Patrick Horvath's story, Beneath the Trees, Where Nobody Sees. And I had been hearing about this story, and then it won recently the Harvey Awards at the New York Comic Con for Book of the Year. And I was like, okay, now I have to check this out. Like, what is this story? And it's amazing. Like, I just loved it. It's essentially like, if people who know the Richard Scarry world of children's literature, where, you know, you have a town, a small town that is quaint and simple, and the animals, you know, populate the town. They're like, the animals move around like humans. They talk and they own shops and everything. And there's a bear who her name is Samantha Strong, and she owns like the hardware store in town, the convenience store. But Samantha, and so I'm giving away things that are revealed in the first issue, so these aren't spoilery type things, but this is the setup for it. Samantha lives in the small town and is a serial killer, but has rules, Dexter-esque rules, that she doesn't kill anybody in her town. She goes into the city nearby, and she picks people at random and then horrifically mutilates them and buries them in the woods. And that's when she feels at peace. She's like, I'm at my calmest when I'm essentially butchering somebody horribly.
Everyone needs a hobby.
Yeah, right, exactly. She goes back to her quaint small town and discovers that there is another serial killer at work, but who is picking off the people of her small town. And she feels, you know, that it's haphazard and clumsy, and it's going to probably shine some light on the devious stuff that she's been doing. So it's in her best interest to stop this reckless serial killer so that people don't understand that she's been a serial killer this whole time. And to tell you that that is the tip of the iceberg is the best recommendation I can give you. Like, if you think I've given away too much, don't worry about it. There's plenty more to come from this story. And from what I understand, Patrick Horvath is actually working on, you know, other chapters, like new stories, you know, to come in the world. And if you really dig Samantha Strong, or Sam Strong, the character in the book, she is going to show up in DCKO, which is the DC battle that's happening over in DC Comics right now. She's going to be a character in that. So I want to see that crossover as well, too. But Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. So, Sierra, it is one part Scream, and it's one part American Psycho. So imagine those two sort of mixed together. Yeah, it's really, really disturbing and phenomenal. So highly recommend.
And the art does not, the art that I had seen of it did not point me in that direction. That's fascinating.
Yeah, no, I kind of love the fact that it's like this Fisher-Price Little People, you know, type of tone, but with some really grisly imagery sprinkled throughout it. So
hell yeah.
You'll love it. All right, give me one more before we get out of here for the week.
If I'm going to give one movie recommendation that I feel like enough people haven't seen, you know, because you can recommend the classics, you could recommend the old classics, the new classics. The movie House, 1977, Nobuhiko Obayashi, is the most incredible story. It is not quite comedy, not quite horror or fantastical folkloric. It's about this group of sisters that go to this haunted house in the forest to go visit their old aunt, only to find that strange happenings are in the house. And I just want you to look up. I'm gonna hope that there's an image on screen right now, just like a series of images, just here, and that is going to sell you on this movie, because there's nothing I could say that would prepare you for what you're about to experience.
Oh, okay.
Just trust me. That's all I want.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure that you've earned the audience's trust up to this point, but we shall see what kind of...
These images will earn the trust. The images, the
All right.
pictures, the beauty of it.
Well, what we want to hear from you guys in the comments down below are some of your horror recommendations, whether it be streaming shows, comics necessarily. There's a great run of horror comics that are going on right now. Even some movies, like we were sort of talking about some of the movies at the beginning of the show where we got into Sinners and Weapons, and Frankenstein is starting to come out to certain theaters. So if you guys are getting a chance to check that out, drop your reviews in the comments down below. We want to obviously thank Jim for coming on, Jim Zub, talking Conan. We have a string of really exciting guests lined up to join us on Heroes Journey in the next few episodes. So make sure that you guys are hitting subscribe and that you are turning on your notifications so that as soon as the latest episode of Heroes Journey drops, thank you guys so much for continuing to come back and watch the show. Keep sharing it with friends, and we will see you back here next week.